Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today, and welcome back to tonight's second half. Before we jump into it, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below. The merch is displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It doesn't cost you a cent. Click that like button. It takes half a second. If you don't want to miss any of the informative uploads I put out twice daily, click that bell icon. And finally, last but definitely not least, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things, they really do help this channel to continue to grow and go, and they do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get on with tonight's second half, shall we? Guys, just like the title says, major update on Victor. I spoke to Victor today. Like I said, I will wait. He will either call me or text me when he is done with whatever he is doing. We spoke for 45 minutes to an hour. I shared some information with him, talked a little bit about the Border Patrol agent stuff. He's going to look into that. Also, he has two horrifying hunts he wants to share with us, both brand new. Gave him an update on the book. He couldn't believe it. He said, wow, thank you so much. Just really amazing to talk to him. And tonight, he and I are going to be talking and creating tomorrow's upload for you guys to hear. Major information, new hunts, New York, New Mexico. I cannot wait. I hope you guys are just as excited as I am, because I am. I've literally been just going about 10 miles a minute to get everything done, to have everything perfect. So when 7 o'clock comes and I receive that phone call, I can sit down, have my laptop hooked up, my mic, and start recording and talking to my near and dear friend. You know, and it was awesome because I was like, I didn't know if I should bother you or not, and this and that. And he goes, "You're my friend. I'll always call you." You know, so it was awesome. It really was. And tomorrow is going to be just the little details that he gave me was just like, wow. So that's the major update on Victor. I can't wait until you guys hear tomorrow's upload, and you know, today's second half is going to be phenomenal as well. It just, in a subscriber's own voice, people have been asking about it when I talk about this on the live stream. How tactical, how really intelligent these creatures are. You know, it's all intelligence. And this experience shows exactly how intelligent they are. So let's get into it. On the phone right now, and he is going to share his experiences and details of what I couldn't from the story that he typed out to me. So Dan, would you like to say hi to everybody?
How's it going, everyone? I'm Dan. And like Jeff said, I was the EMT on board our ambulance that we had that encounter that night. And, you know, like Jeff and I have discussed, my partner really got the most out of that sighting. And like I've also discussed with Jeff before, I have permission to relay his whole side of the thing. But, you know, short about me, I've just been in EMS a wicked long time, since 2001. And, yeah, served Greater Connecticut, and I have no problems discussing the encounter. Everyone already thinks I'm nuts anyway, so get into it.
So that night you were heading out to, is that a location that you normally go to?
Yeah, so private ambulances, and they have a lot of interfacility contracts. And if, you can look at a map, or even if you're familiar with Connecticut enough, Hartford's basically in the middle, and that's the city that I serve. In the way northeast corner of Connecticut, there's a town called Putnam, named after the general, and I'll actually touch on the local wolf lore as we get into this around the town of Putnam and surrounding the general, but there's a hospital out there. We had a contract to pick up, it was the end of the night. We got out at 5 a.m., and, around 2, 3 in the morning, they're like, why don't you go take this long ride, kill your shift? And we got about 20 minutes, half hour down the street from this hospital, and that's when the Putnam truck signed on for the morning, and they decided to take the run, and the dispatch kind of staggers things because there's dialysis pickup, scheduled patient appointments, but the truck didn't have anything that morning, so they canceled us, told us to go back to the city, and that way we could just punch out and they take care of the run. So that's how we wound up in that neighborhood. And when we got canceled, I was a little familiar with the area, actually having spent part of my childhood in the town. Ashford, Connecticut's the name of the town. It's literally a one-stop light town. Whole lot of woods, whole lot of nothing. It's very heavily wooded in northeastern Connecticut. And like I previously mentioned, it's the quiet corner. So few residences and few small businesses. I think the biggest building in town's a Cumberland Farms. It's like one of those like 20-foot tall ones. It's about it. Yeah. And I knew going down the state route that if you go down Pumpkin Hill Road, you can take a right onto Bevington, or right onto Slade, or right onto 89, and then you can go left back on 44. So instead of doing a K-turn in our big bus, I was like, just hop down this road. And my partner, not being familiar with the area, was waiting for my instructions, and I had my face in the laptop, and that's when he said, do you see that? What is that? And that's when I closed it. Because, in your ambulance cockpit, you have all these lights and whistles and dings and things, so it can be hard to see at night, and the laptop wasn't helping. So I shut it and looked up, but it's not like I had to squint that hard or really focus. We were within 100 feet of this thing when he said something, and it was just like, boom, right in my face. And, my first thought is, what the fuck is that thing? And we started just discussing it logically. Like, is it, it looks like a dog. Is it somebody's dog? If it's lost, why is it out here at like 4 a.m? And, maybe it has a collar. Maybe we should stop and say hi, because we were thinking it, could have been a farmer's dog, or, anybody's dog that just, shouldn't have been wandering around the woods alone at night. But, as we started to slow the bus down and get closer, the bigger and bigger and bigger it was obvious just how big this thing was. And then that's when it kind of took the turn into the supernatural, paranormal kind of area, because we weren't thinking that it was just a regular dog, like almost simultaneously at that point. And when we got really close to it, that 20 or 30 feet marker is, instant blood ran cold, hair stands on end, and, you get a little jittery, just even talking about it now. But that's when it stood up. Like, if you were a catcher in baseball and you're in that squatting position and just stood up, it was just that natural. And usually when dogs, little dogs that beg for uppies and, try and stand on their hind legs, and they're quick to go back down, this guy had his feet planted, and he was rotating on the balls of his feet when he went to turn. It was all natural, smooth movement for him. So that's kind of how we got into that area and how the encounter really started.
That is terrifying. Like when I was narrating it, and when you said that you had seen many canine and stuff, little dogs, or, any dog that when they want a treat, they've got that little bounce to them when they're trying to maintain, standing on 2 legs. That's when it did its kind of cock its head at you and had its ears back. When the whole story to me is frightening. Because I didn't read it prior to narrating it. And so when I got to the end, I was just like, wow, that is scarier than the initial Dogman that you saw, because it was like it was almost talking to you. The first one was almost talking to you telepathically, you know, like, hey, I see you, you see me, you know, like.
Yeah, it was so creepy that you actually just nailed it. You know, it was like there was like this unspoken message, and its body language, you know, you spend a lot of time in, you know, not just EMS, but any customer service jobs. Oh, that's all EMS is. It's like being a dirty whore. You shut your mind off and, you know, get to the end of your shift, but you learn to read people and, you know, body language. And when he had this, the initial Dogman had this canter, like it was, I couldn't tell if it was limping or what. He like, maybe he was trying to trick us into, he's thinking he was wounded, but I just think that was the way that it walked. Like, I'm the biggest motherfucker on this block. This is the way I walk. You deal with it. And that's the feeling I really got, like, looking at this thing, like that swagger. And then when he stood up, like that, hey, I see you. I know you can see me. And that's when, you know, your heart starts pumping, the adrenaline starts pumping, like, all right, what exactly kind of situation am I in here right now? You know, and you try to analyze it. Am I in danger? How do I get out of this? And you start running through all those questions in your head. But it did definitely send some kind of message, just some feeling through body language. It wasn't quite telepathic, but, you know, it had that canter that, you know, I'm the Banff on this road, you know, and, you know, you're going to drive by me. So let's do something about it. And then it stood up. And when it did its head tilt, so it turned its head to the left, these huge shoulders, just huge arms, huge everything. And I'll get into more on that in a minute. But when it did that head tilt, it glassed us. It looked directly at us, like with its like left eye, and it was definitely glowing. And his tongue was kind of lolling. But that's how I could see its teeth, and I could, you know, see his tongue and what color it was, because we were pretty close to him at that point. But then when it whipped its ears back and it kind of growled, or it just made that, like, baring its teeth gesture, and, you know, that's when I got that feeling, like, what are you going to do about it? And we had actually stopped the bus at that point, right when it stood up, because we were just so taken aback by what we had seen. And then, you know, within I would say 30 seconds, maybe a minute at the most, because he stood there kind of staring at us while we were stopped, and then he kind of got this feeling like I had enough of this, and he jumped to the side of the road. When
he was staring at you, was he still like sideways staring, or did he stare, like did he turn and face you head on?
His back was mostly to us, okay. So I got a really good look at like his left shoulder, a really good look at his back. His feet stayed planted and facing away from us. So I got a really great profile view.
Okay.
And that's when I could see its whole snout and you know, his left eye. And, you know, when you realize that we stopped, that's when he whipped his ears back and kind of smirked. And that's just that, you know, you hear a lot of different encounters about a smirk or a smile. And that's definitely what we got with our encounter.
Okay. Maybe he was walking like that because of your very vivid description of his man parts. I know a lot of people like myself were, you know, that was, you know, his eyes were the size of racquetballs and his testicles were basketball size. Can you elaborate on that for us?
I mean, basketballs might be a little egregious, but
right.
And after you know, an encounter, I feel like a lot of people need answers. So they go to the internet. They initially, you know, I think that was a werewolf. Maybe what else could it be? They scroll into Dogman territory, and it'll always take you out to Bray Road. It'll always take you out to Wexford County. And then once you get deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole, you start to find the local encounters. And the, you know, closest things I could find were Massachusetts. But I hear all of these encounters, and nobody talks about genitalia or the sex of the Dogman, but this was very clearly a male animal. It was very 100% a male, and everything about this guy was so big, including his boy parts. And we just basically saw his balls from the back, and, you know, he he had no problems, like, just throwing it all out there. I mean, what are you supposed to do when you have balls that large, I guess?
Yeah.
But, like, I mean, I'd have nicknamed him Sparky if they, dragged on the ground, because it was just unfathomable. And I think at one point I even said to my partner, like, did you see that thing's balls? And he was just like, yup. That's all he had to elaborate on it. But it was just, everything about the creature was big, and it was definitely male. That's, and I've always wondered, like, if it's a half human, half dog, we can speculate about the genetics of it or whatever, but, like, do, female dogmen have human breasts, or do they have teats like a dog? I've always wondered these questions.
Yeah.
Nobody seems to talk about them or seems to sex their encounters. And as far as, what my partner saw, he couldn't see or elaborate on anything, just other than this overwhelming feeling that the black dogman was a male. He just had that alpha attitude, and he was bigger than the dogman we saw in front of us, according to him. If the dogman we saw in front of us had stopped at the windshield on the bus, the black dogman that was over my right shoulder that I didn't know about until 10 years later, his head was over the windshield, probably up where our light bar is, and that's like 13 feet.
Yeah, so what do you think about 12 feet?
He was a big dude.
12 feet, somewhere around there? Because you said the light bar was 13, so the windshield would probably be 10 feet, maybe, at the end of the windshield or something? Yeah,
it's about... So the top of my head to the deck, where the wheels hit the ground, is probably like 9 feet sitting in the bus. And then we have that overhead, and then the light bar on top. And the light bar adds probably, I don't know, like a foot. It's one of those old bracket mounts. It wasn't like a Phantom that's built into the ambulance. So, and I doubt it was a 10-foot tall dog man, because of forced perspective and other tricks of the eyes. But, you hear all these encounters, and they're anywhere from, average height, 5'10", and, I've heard of encounters where they do get over 10 feet tall, 12 feet tall, and there's, I don't know, I've heard all these theories and, like, a type whatever or type this. I just think that's all fucking stupid.
Yeah,
I think a dogman's a dogman.
I disagree with that 100%.
I think they're like people, that's just me. And they all look a little different, and I always thought the typing and categorizing of them was kind of silly. But these all had that classic, like, just that classic, werewolf look. And they were huge. They were all about that, like, if I had to give an honest-to-God assessment, like, they were easily taller than me, a foot taller than me. So I could say 7 to 9 to 10 feet tall. Honestly, and the two dogmen that crept up behind us that I didn't see, that shot off to the side of the road. My partner did say they look smaller, but not that much smaller. Okay. So they're all probably, within that, I would guess 7 to 9 foot tall area.
So then after you see this guy, he's standing, he decides to jump out of the way. And the way you described his jump is it was not really even a crouch jump, but he elongated his body and just kind of jumped out of the way. And then you thought the encounter ended there. He punched it, and you put the window down. You want to share a little more before you give the second part of the point of view of your partner?
Yeah, so I have this habit of, curiosity will absolutely kill me in one day, and satisfaction will probably bring me back, as the saying goes. But so we rolled up behind this guy, and he stands up, and then he turns his head and does his little grr and whips his ears back. And, in nature, when something whips its ears back, it doesn't want to be your friend. And the most I could equate it to is that old movie Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, where the people are basically flying. He was walking plantigrade, like balls of his feet. He just turned and jumped. And on the side of the road, there was like a hedgerow, like a little guardrail, not like an aluminum guardrail, but like the posts with the wire between it. And then this hedgerow that was easily like 6 feet tall, and then it just goes into woods and, fields around there. I think there was one house on the side of the road where we were, and it was on my side of the road, but we were down the street from it a little bit. So it was just jet black woods, and he just turns in the balls of his feet and maybe a bend the knee motion, and up and away he went. And you could see his quads flexing. He had these massive legs, size of a man's waist easily.
Wow.
And he just went up and over. It was so unreal to watch because, even if you watch athletes do, you're like, wow, that's incredible. But this was like not normal. This was just something so huge that had that much power from a standing position to jump that high and that far back. It was like watching something you'd expect to see in a movie, something you'd never expect to see in real life. It just up and away. That's where he went. And, when he landed, I just heard this crash, like everything that was in his way was probably obliterated. What? And I heard that before I rolled the window down. So I rolled it down. I was
really
like,
quick.
Did that motherfucker just take out a tree? Like, what the fuck did he just do? So I went to look behind me.
Dan. And
that's when Ron stopped me.
Dan, really quick.
Yep.
Not to cut you off, but I got a couple. Just when he jumped and you saw, with the feet, were they more humanish or pawed? And what do you think its weight was? I mean, you're in EMT. You've got pretty good gauge of weight. I'm sure you've dealt with a lot of people, and with your filling out paperwork and protocol and stuff like that. Can you elaborate on the feet and probably the weight of this guy?
So his feet, if you could picture, it definitely looked like a combo of a paw and a human foot. So you could see an Achilles heel. I could see the heel, but he was pretty much planted on the balls of his feet. And he did have clawed feet. They had these massive, massive claws. And when he rotated, he just kind of planted and he just turned, just turned, smooth motion, balls of his feet. And that's when, so he turned from left to right, and that's when I got the other profile, the other right side profile view of him, and then just poof, gone. He jumped up and away. But so his feet were really long, and vertically and horizontally they were really long, and he had these thick pads, like you could kind of see like pads, where he was planted on the balls of his feet, and his heel looked like a human heel, but the front where his toes were and where those digits were, definitely had like a little pad, like this really thick pad, and then I couldn't tell how many digits he had. I would assume 4 or 5 to be that stable on his feet, and then these claws coming off of him. And if I had to weigh the guy, I mean, somebody that tall, and if I had to guess, just honest assessment, he was easily 300 pounds, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was tilting closer to like 500. And if, we have a lot of black bears in the area, and the biggest black bear I've ever seen at the state park out here was like 6'3", and he weighed like close to 400 pounds. I think the game warden I talked to who handled that sighting said he weighed something like 380, 390. So, you got 3 feet on a black bear, and, the guy was probably, 0% body fat. So he was probably, like I said, wouldn't be surprised if he was tilting closer to, anywhere from that 400 to 500 pound range.
Okay. All right. Wow. All right. Well, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off on that. I wanted to, because I wanted to, you got to see this excellent shot of this thing jumping, a very rare occasion. And that's what's amazing about your encounter. Not just that it shows that the pack mentality and the intelligence of them, but you got to see features that people normally don't describe, you know what I mean? And so I just wanted to touch on that. So then you were driving down the road, you put your window down, or no, you heard the crash before you put your window down?
Yeah, because I thought like he took something out. Like I thought like a tree came down, or like I don't know what the hell I thought, but something was definitely broken, and that's what prompted me to want to stick my head out the window and look behind us. And my partner said no, like absolutely not. And I didn't realize until years later why he stopped me. And after I rolled my window down, like you could hear, I described it almost like as a chuckle, like you know how hyenas kind of yip and like yap to each other?
Yep.
And coyotes kind of do the same thing. There was this like, I could hear, and it was so loud. It was ridiculously loud. And I don't know why at that time I didn't think that there were more dogmen, because, you know, it was just an awful lot of noise coming from that side of the road. And when I went to roll my window down, you could hear them. You know, I honestly think that they were laughing, but, you know, maybe that's just how they communicate to each other or how they talk to each other. But after I rolled my window down, that's when you could kind of hear this mix of a hyena and like a low howl. It was really weird, very odd noise to describe.
All right. Wow, that is. And then you guys. So how far were you from your town to what, about 20 minutes, half an hour? You said, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And then you guys just drove there, going. Did you fucking see that? And you know, like doing the basic guy shit because you just.
Yeah, we had a pretty animated conversation on the way back.
All right, and then so 9 years go by. Now you worked with your partner for what, 5 years?
5 years, yeah.
And then you guys were separated for 4 or something like that, and then you just approached him one day and said, "Hey," or did he approach you and say?
Well, we've always been good friends. To this day, we're still great friends. So we talk a lot, and every once in a while, I just kind of poke and prod him, be like, "Hey, remember that crazy ass dog we'd say?" And he'd go, "Yup," and then just immediately want to talk about something else. They'll leave it at that. But I was bullshitting him on the phone one day, and I was like, "Come on, man! Like, what happened that messed you up so bad? You know, it's like the one thing that, you know, it's pretty awesome to see that, you know, you just can't elaborate on or describe." And I think I finally got to him, and he was just like, "Look, I'll tell you." And he's like, "You're not going to like it, but I'll tell you." And then that's how I kind of just got his side of the story out of him.
Wow, that's. Can you get into that for us? Like, share, like, can you tell us the demographics of his seat and how he would see what he saw? Like,
yep. So my partner, he's a big dude. He's probably like 6'3", 350. And, you know, when you share an ambulance, you know, you got to adjust the mirrors and things like that. And he would get so annoyed with me changing it that he just decided to drive, you know, all of the time. And, you know, sitting in the passenger seat, you know, the mirrors, you know, are basically angled to the sky. I can't see jack shit out of him sitting in the passenger seat, but he's pretty tall and he drives sitting straight up. So he has a pretty good view of everything going on around you. And like I mentioned in my type-up of the encounter, that there's a mobile data terminal that sits in the center of the bus. And you got these quick hits that rotate to all the cameras, and from compartment area to starboard and port sides and to the rear. And while he was doing that, I wasn't focused on him at all. I was focused on the dogman in front of us. And, you know, so I have a pretty good attention to detail, but in that one I had pretty shitty situational awareness where, you know, thank God he did, or who knows what we could have wound up in, you know. So if he's in the driver's seat and he was listening for my directions because I was familiar with the area, he says, "All right, you know, what is that?" And we slow down and we stop. And when we had stopped, he wasn't looking at the dogman in front of us. He was looking at the MDT. And this, getting into this part of the encounter, is all from his perspective. This is me relaying his perspective. So what he told me was, when I was still looking forward, in that couple of seconds before the dogman decided to leap off to the side of the road, he was looking down at the MDT, and he cycled left, cycled behind us, and he said, "Oh shit," because he saw 2 dogmen crouch behind us, and then cycled to the right. And when he cycled to the right, the camera was almost blacked out. He said he could see, like, you know, fur, you know, just black fur. And then that's when he looked up into the mirror. And when he looked up into the mirror, there's a dogman staring straight at him, just straight at him. And he said that the dogman was facing, so his chest was facing and his head was facing the mirror, and he was using his right hand to reach across to try and pry the door open, and his left hand was actually on the side of the bus. So he's standing facing forward with the ambulance, left hand's on the side of the bus, and he's reaching across with his right hand to try and open the patient compartment door. But as I previously mentioned, that all the doors lock when the vehicle's in motion, and they don't unlock until we unlock them. So fortunately for us, nothing more came of that, but I could only imagine, was the dogman trying to, see if we had anything of value in there? Was he trying to get at our narc box? Was he just fucking with us? These are questions I will never have the answer to. But from my partner's perspective, that's what he was up to. And he said that he got the worst feeling from looking at this thing in the mirror. It couldn't have been more than 4 or 5 feet off of my right shoulder. And he said that when he looked up into the mirror, its mouth was initially closed, but the second he made eye contact with it, it smiled. Like the creepiest, biggest, Cheshire cat grin smiled. And my partner, I always thought this part was funny because he said he looked like an asshole. And I was like, I don't know how you think a dog looks like an asshole, but he just got this feeling that this guy was a dick. Like he was a straight just douchebag. And, as we sped away, it pulled its hands really back away from the ambulance and turned and joined his buddies. And while he's looking in the mirror, this thing's huge and it was kind of blocking out the camera port, but the mirrors on ambulances, at least, his box type ambulance we had, were pretty big. Plus you got that little fisheye mirror down in the right hand corner. And he said he could see the two that were behind us jumping to the right side of the road where the initial dogman went. They were behind our bus. And I don't know how long our ambulance is, only how tall, but figure, another 15 feet. So they were pretty close. And he could see those bodies move in back of the black dogman and jump up and over and go into the brush as well. So a lot happened really, really quickly from his perspective. And if he didn't have the wherewithal to rotate the MDTs, God knows, because how long, could we have potentially been sitting there for? And I'm sure if the dogman wanted to rip the door off of the patient compartment area, he absolutely could have. So, and that's one thing that's always bothered me too, is that's a classic ambush. You don't got to be in the military to know, to recognize a distraction in front and, a flank attack and a couple people approaching you from behind, so they're definitely smart, definitely wicked intelligent. And, I don't know, I think we got pretty lucky speeding away when we did, because if we sat still any longer, who knows what could have happened.
Right. That is, just his description, it looked like an asshole. Like it was just, I just pictured this malicious, terrifying smile. And then, there you are putting your window down, just, and this poor guy is in his head going, put the window back up, and were the other two dogman, that he saw, the coyote brown ones, were they both bipedal, or were they on all fours, did he say?
They were on all fours. So the view that my partner described, he switched to the left-hand side camera, didn't see anything, switched to the rear camera, and that's when he saw the tops of their heads, their snouts, and this isn't he turned the scene lights on, and these are these disastrously bright LED lights, plus we had a little bit of the red glow from our brake lights, so everything he could see through the camera was actually very clear. But he saw the tops of their heads, their ears, the tops of their snouts, the tops of their shoulders. And as he describes them, that they were human shoulders. And they were 4 feet, and he could only see maybe from halfway up their back, and the top halves of their bodies. So basically a pretty good, and that camera angles down at like 45 degrees, so you can see a little bit in back of the step. And he said he saw the tops of their bodies, and they had these big paw hands. A lot of people describe them as the raccoon hands, but my partner didn't use any of that real terminology to describe what he saw. He just saw, big hands with claws on them. That's how he really described them. Planted, and they were on all fours, just in that crouched position, basically ready to go. One jumped to the right side of the road. He cycles the camera through, and he sees the black Dogman, and the other two just jump from behind him. But he described them as coyote tan, maybe a little bit of gray, and just that typical, coyote color.
Right. The one that was in front of you, I mean, because he really couldn't see anything other than, like a little bit of the backside of the two behind him, and probably nothing of the backside of the asshole. Did the one in front of you, did it have a tail, and how can you explain it if it did, what it looked like?
It did have a tail. It was bushy, like a wolf's tail, and it was pretty long. Like everything else with the dude, he was big, and it just hung down like a lot of people use, like maybe like a Malamute or a husky, just a bushy tail like that, and it was pretty long.
Okay.
It didn't reach all the way to the ground where his feet was, but it was like a average tail length for a dog, I suppose. It would end about halfway down his legs, about where you'd expect a tail like that. And when he stood up, he wasn't wagging his tail or anything like that, and it wasn't erect. It just kind of hung with his body when he stood up. Kind
of limp, like, just like...
Yeah, yep.
Okay. All right. That is, like I said, I mean, I cannot say how many times, and I've read the comments of when I shared it last night, and back about a year ago, almost, about a year and a half ago, and people are like, this is the most amazing, epic encounter they've ever heard, and it's because you had so much detail. Like, there's detail. It shows the pack mentality. It shows the intelligence, and like you said, what if we were in a Mini Cooper? Or, what if it was just some woman by herself, or an old man or an old woman, a young teenager? What would have happened? And that's things that you don't want to think about. And you guys were definitely fortunate to be in a very, very secure vehicle. But like you said, it could probably rip the doors off if it really wanted to. Now, the back compartment, let's say if the black one ripped that door off, could it get into you guys where you guys were, or would it be stuck in the patient compartment?
No, there's the patient compartment in the back, and they call it a walk-through, but it's not a walk-through. It's probably like a 3.5-foot tall area that connects the front of the ambulance to the box. And if he opened that door, the first thing you would have seen in front of him was a big step, and with diamond plating. And then that's the up over that diamond plating is the floor of the ambulance, then what's called the captain's chair or the airway chair. And to the right from that side would have been that little walk-through. And that's just kind of our area where we can reach through to each other. Hey, hand me the radio, I need to patch this hospital, or hey, could you throw me a pen, something like that. So there is a little bit of open space, but not enough for anybody to actually physically walk through it. But he probably easily could have reached us, with his arms being as long as he could have. He probably could have, reached around and, done some kind of damage if he got his arm in that way.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, yeah. All right, well, like I said, I'm wicked honored to have you on. But there is another part to this story. There is the lore of General Israel Putnam. And can you share that with us? Because I like that historic part of the story as well.
It's one of the most fascinating stories to me because, and I apologize if I get my dates wrong, but I want to say it was like 1759, somewhere really close. But if you look up the town of Pomfret, Connecticut, it's Pomfret, there's a park called Wolf Den State Park, and the Wolf Den is still there, and it's rocky. It is really rocky. It's on a high slope. It's, in heavy defilade. And to get to the physical wolf den, I've taken the hike a couple of times. It's actually very difficult. And to go down into the wolf den is impossible. I couldn't fit in it if I tried. But as the story goes, and as the legend, well, not legend, it happened. There's historical accounts of it. General Putnam was a young man at the time, and wolves slaughtered livestock in this part of Connecticut when we were first settling it. The town was initially purchased from the Mohegan tribe. White settlers started settling it, and they could not keep livestock alive because of the wolf packs. So they started hunting them. And fun fact, the word Mohegan actually means people of the wolf, which I always thought was pretty interesting, and tying that all together. So there's a lot of just wolf type lore around the area.
Yep.
And he one morning wakes up. It was a bad winter, having enough problems, and it was in the spring. And they had killed. It was a she-wolf. They had killed her mate, and every year she had a litter. And every year they would kill the litter, and they finally got its mate. So after that had happened, General Putnam wakes up on his farm one day, and he wakes up to 70 sheep just completely slaughtered. Not eaten, not taken for food or anything, just out of sheer malice, the she-wolf slaughters about 70 sheep. So the general at the time gets a bunch of people together, and they agree to, finally end this, finally solve this problem. And they track her down to her den. And initially, Israel Putnam tried to send his slave into the den, and the slave said, absolutely not, I'm not going in there. So there were 3 separate trips into the wolf den. Israel Putnam had tied a rope around his legs. They lowered him into the den to spot the wolf, took him back out, and by this time he lost a lot of his posse. He only had a couple of people left with him because they were so terrified. The second trip down, he goes down with a torch and a rifle, and he shot the she-wolf. And after the gunshot, they took Israel Putnam out. And then the third trip down was to recover the body. And so they lower him by the rope again. He recovers the she-wolf's body, and that was the last wolf killed in Connecticut. And you can look that story up online. It's in all the, the town historical records, and Historical Society has it, right on their front page. And I always thought that was a really just interesting story, considering the area that we were in. I didn't talk a lot physically about the area, but Pumpkin Hill Road, other than heavily wooded, there's a bunch of water sources. There's a couple of rivers that run nearby. There's two gigantic lakes. Well, gigantic for, tiny little northeast Connecticut anyway. And there's a gas line. There's a lot of excellent pheasant and deer hunting. So there's plenty of food sources, plenty of water sources. And if they're not local, I mean, that gas line's a pretty good corridor for them to travel so easily.
Right.
So there's, as well as the historical and lore, there's also the very real environmental consideration, or factors that could have kept them there, or why they moved that way on through.
Yeah, it's funny because I've always thought of Connecticut as like the suburb of the state of New York, and we have a town up here called Putnam Station, and it's a town named after General Putnam. Of course, I live 10 minutes away from Fort William Henry, a very historic, part of the Revolutionary War. So all of those generals and, Revolutionary War heroes were mentioned growing up. You just learned about it in school because it's rich, we're rich with lore. But how you're describing Northeast Connecticut is more or less kind of where I live. It's very rocky, it's very woodsy, rugged, and then, excuse me, and then you've got, so you'd go from Connecticut to the city and then up through. So there is a perfect path or a way to go through, like you got the Hudson River Valley to get there. And, it's a lot of rich history there and a lot of area for them to travel as well,
Absolutely. We have the Connecticut River Valley here too, the Thames River Valley, a lot of wide open corridors, and if you're going to follow water and food sources, I think they could absolutely do it undetected. We, like any other state, you have your heavy population areas and then your quiet corners. And I mean, they're obviously smart enough to avoid people, or at least only show themselves when they feel like it, in our case. But, who knows? You could... It's so heavily wooded, you could be in a residential area and Dogman could be staring at you and maybe you'd never know, you know? It's just kind of how Connecticut is and the Northeast is. We're hilly, we're rocky, and there's always trees to hide behind.
Yep. It's definitely, like you said, every state has its place for them to hide, and they could be 20 feet from you and you not know, and it's a scary thing. It is scary. And I'm just glad that you're here and sharing this with us. I really, really appreciate you responding back. Truly am. And it's wow. So, is there anything else that you'd like to say to anybody, or you got any details that you might have left off or anything?
I covered most of it, but one thing with encounters that people get into is there's always like an overpowering smell. I didn't get an overpowering smell or anything like that. Definitely a sense of dread, and a lot of people will get that sense of dread before they see the Dogman, or they just know something's wrong and their encounter hasn't happened yet. We felt like the world was completely normal and fine until the dog stood up. So I always thought my encounter was a little weird like that. Like it didn't quite line up with everybody else. It was after, things started to get really weird that I got that overwhelming sense of dread. And, my partner, after, telling me his perspective of the story, pretty much just doesn't want to talk. He laid it all out there for me, so I finally stopped bugging him. But he was pretty shaken up over the whole thing. And, 10 years later, 9 years later, after he shares the story with me, it was like going right back there. And, I was completely unaware of what he saw and completely unaware of this, behemoth Dogman, just standing behind my right shoulder. And when he told me his side of the story, I got that like overwhelming sense of dread again. These things like screw with you. If you see one, you'll remember it for the rest of your life. Like you said earlier when we were talking, 20 years later, from back in '94, you can still remember everything that you saw. Here I am, 10 years later, and I can still remember everything you saw. So if you want to go into the woods and look for a Dogman, that's on you, man. But just be prepared for what you're going to see, and I give researchers all of the credit in the world, especially people trying to look for proof and legitimize these things, because, I know they're real. I mean, I've seen one. There's a lot of skeptics out there, and I feel like with a lot of encounters, you have to give people the benefit of the doubt, and you never really know what's real or not unless you see it for yourself. Well, if you see one for yourself, you'll know that it's real then.
Yeah,
I promise you.
You'll never forget it, because, like you just said, I remember the details. I remember that whole scenario. I remember the song we were listening to, the people that were there, just like everything. And you just don't forget it, because it's just like a scar in your memory that is just never going away. And I think it's therapeutic talking about it.
Oh, definitely.
And then hearing more people come out helps too, because for years I only had I mean, you had nobody to talk to except your partner who wanted to shun it. But, I had 4 other people that went through this encounter, and one other person would talk about it with me. And, it's not therapeutic, because your brain society tells you these things don't exist. Your brain then conforms to society, and then when you see it, you're completely mentally fucked for, a while until you can talk about it. And, so I think your encounter helps people a lot, because it gives the detail, it gives it has a lot of detail. So it may bring people out that say, hey, wow, I had something like that happen. This guy is an EMT and he shared it. Why can't I? So
exactly, yeah. If anybody's listening that has had an encounter and you're afraid or whatever, you're just a human being, man. Nobody's gonna think anything different of you. I've had people call me all kinds of neat things. It's life. It is what it is. You're not gonna feel better until you do talk about it. And Jeff's a great resource for that. I'm a healthcare provider. I won't look at your weird sticky wounds, but if you want to talk, even I'm always here. Talking about your encounter is healthy. There's no sense in bottling it up. I mean, it's the 21st century. We're finally taking mental health care seriously, and it's no different than having a broken arm or a broken leg or a broken foot. You got a mental wound, and if it's bothering you, talk about it. That's the best advice I could give anybody, and it absolutely is therapeutic. And the more you talk about it, the better you feel, and the more people that come forward and talk about it, and the better that they feel, the more normal that this will get. And maybe one day somebody will be quick enough to get one on a camera. Maybe one day somebody will be fortunate enough to find a puppy and bring it in for scientific research. I don't want these creatures to ever be harmed, even in the name of science. There's a lot of heavy Native American influence in this part of the state, and I grew up with that kind of influence. And that belief is that these wolf people and other things like Sasquatch and other little people and other lore in the area, they've been here for centuries, well before we were.
Yeah.
It's perfectly normal to talk about. There's a historical context, and plenty of other people that have seen them. And it doesn't make you crazy. It doesn't make you a bad person or whatever you may feel about yourself if you've had an encounter and don't want to share it. Just share it. You'll feel better. I promise.
All right. Well, right now, I've come up onto the time with my recording, and I want to thank you. And, once again, I can't thank you enough, Dan, for coming on, and I want to say goodbye. I know a lot of people wanted to hear it, so thanks. And I don't know what else to say, but thank you so much.
You're welcome. I always got your back, man.
All right. Well, everybody, I'm going to cut the night short, and Dan, say goodbye to everybody.
Good night, everybody.
All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this interview as much as I enjoyed sharing this with you. This really does show exactly how intelligent these creatures are. And like Dan said, I had found this experience on Reddit quite a few years ago. Reached out to him, said, hey, I'm interested in sharing this. And he said, let me type out the better and updated version for you. Because this experience had sat in a forum for years, unread, untouched, and just absolutely blew my mind when I read it. I was like, this is incredible. Someone needs to talk to this guy. And Dan's a super, super sweet guy. Just really nice, really humble, just like all of us, he's part of the family. So, and with that, I'm excited about tonight's interview with Victor. Man, I cannot wait. I cannot wait to hear the new info. I told him about the book. I filled him in about, things that I've been talking about and covering. I showed him the video where that thing crossed the trail. He said that's either a Bigfoot or a werewolf, definitely not a Dogman. I did not see a tail. I said I didn't either. He said not a bear though. A bear couldn't run down a hill bipedally and then drop onto all fours and continue to go down into a ravine. It more or less would just roll. Anyway, guys, thank you for all the support. It really does mean the absolute world to me. With that, stay safe, happy, healthy, vigilant in the woods. Keep your family close to you when you're out there hiking, picnicking, whatever. Keep an eye on the kids, but have fun, you know. These things are just, it's a chance in a lifetime, I guess, to see one. But we have to remember that they're out there, just like bear are out there. Deer, you know, we don't see them every day, but we know they're out there. So, all right, guys, God bless every one of you.